had many great pre-recorded sort of moments already, and I think this is going to be something that hopefully is really going to be a contribution as to why this technology is really kind of helping sustain freedom of art, which is close to freedom of speech and expression, and why it's necessary. So, hopefully this is going to be something that is going to tickle some nerves as well as some inspiration.
It definitely was an inspiration already to have this preliminary talks with you. And sometimes I really regret that we did not record yet. So let's jump into it.
Sure.
We have this phrase that we hear all over, democratization of the art world through the new technology, through NFTs. Is there a sense of democratization, or rather not?
Well, it's a bit of a two-sided sword, I suppose, in that kind of a way, is that if you look at art through the historic lens, let's say starting all the way from cave paintings to being body painted with mud or whatever, something like that, that was a transcended ritual that churches then adopted, and all of these powerful players in the world, and the kind of real power of art, you take it all the way from us starting as humanity, going now all the way to the metaverse and Neuralink, and then being eventually probably immersed in artworks that interact with you and know who you are maybe better than you know yourself. So that's all the scope that we have as possibility. And let's say in the world there are now about 100 to 200 different philosophies altogether. It depends on how you count them, and there's about 4,300 religions. There's countless ways in how to interpret the world. And now, let's say the last 40 to 50 years, we've had this dominance of postmodern ideas in terms of philosophy that has been really taking over the art world. It's if you go to the gallery space or museum spaces, and museums, if you're not like really looking at the past, you look at sort of the more contemporary side of museums, you will either get these sort of abstracts or kind of vague ideas or whatever. But if you have clear messaging, it's pretty much always postmodern philosophy that you get to have as a thought process. Or if you don't have that, then you don't belong, and you're kind of silently or vocally ousted from the space. So when we look at the Web3 evolution and taking out the middlemen, and kind of also this trust that we have in the general culture for different kind of experts or different institutions or whatever it is, we're in danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as tired as that saying is, that you do need experts. You do need people who understand where we're coming from. And art has always been a little bit of an elite affair. It has been for the aristocrats and those who really kind of understand the lineage of our world, how we've come to be what we are. To the degree that we know it. So whilst we need some experts, we've simultaneously had an expert class of the last 40 years that has really kind of just maintained this monotonous postmodern philosophy of the world that is really quite cynical. It's always just analyzing power, not the story or the archetypes or transcendence or spiritual ideas or anything like that. It's always this who's in power, and then increasingly the different kind of other postmodern things that are thrown into the mix of it. So now that power broker class has brought it to its absolute peak. And if you look at culture otherwise, you might have something like in comedy, the orbit of Joe Rogan and everyone around it, which is the biggest podcast in the world, but you won't see any references in the gallery space for the most part to the philosophies or the ideas or those kinds of things that these things really are kind of contemplating. And what it suggests is that there's actually very little freedom inside of the creative, let's call it, supported structure of the art world. You're not allowed to express a whole lot, or then it's easily just something that is sidelined. You can maybe be in the sidelines and you won't be canceled or something like that, but you're certainly not included into the power broker area where you're going to be in front of the people who are really going to evaluate your work, and whether that's going to be sort of doing the financial gains as well as reputational gains that it should in that kind of a sphere. So Web3 from that point is really breaking this lineage. But let's say from the beginning of, because I came into crypto art in 2016. I texted in 2016 that I'll be accepting Bitcoin for my artworks. And I came in full-time 2017. And first it was about being inspired by the decentralization, understanding what the technology was doing, and finally digital creativity was going to have a value that is going to be finally getting some of its due that it's been slowly progressing with for the past 40 years. And then now, then we again just imported all the sort of postmodern experts as the experts to the new Web3 realm, and then unsurprisingly, we're kind of stuck in a standstill with it. So maybe that's the really big picture of what we have now. And unless, because I talk about this very begrudgingly, this whole sort of political side or philosophy side in this kind of a way, because I would rather focus on all the different kinds of things of what I've been innovating last 16 years. But I came to the conclusion that unless this is talked about, no one is really making any progress, because we're kind of stuck in this ideological rut that just needs to expand. And I'm not saying anything to take away from anything, feminism, LGBTQ, all, whatever perspectives, totally cool. Have your postmodernism. But like I said, there's about 100 to 200 philosophies and 4,300 religions that are just waiting to be invited to the table so that they can also play. Yeah. So even though now the art world says we're very inclusive, in actual fact, it's leaving out most of the philosophies, most of the religions, the male perspective, the working class. The list is endless. And you could say that the exclusion people now are excluding pretty much the whole of the world.
Do you think we're getting lost in this World Wide Web? Is purpose and orientation something that you cannot really sort out anymore, because everything is included and that creates a huge exclusion for everyone? It's like
everything is included if you're a postmodernist.
Exactly. And this
if you're anything else, then you're excluded. Even if you're, let's say, you agree with a lot of the postmodern ideas and you belong into one of the groups that is sort of held and supported by that thing, if you start to go off script of the narrative in any kind of way, then you're excluded and ousted quite sometimes violently. So it's really like quite a controlled space. And I think why I'm incentivized to really talk about it is that, first of all, I got into this whole thing because there was something that came out of me that I needed to be expressed, and it's an exploration of the world that I've been doing for now 46 years with a massive passion. And I'm just seeing that this is costing us mental health, that leads to physical health, to our collective imagination. If we're not free to explore the world, then there's not much that we can say that we're leaving as a mark from our being in this time whatsoever. And we now have all the tools available for us to do this expression, but we need to unshackle ourselves so that all the different philosophies and different worldviews can really come to play.
And how do you personally react to this situation with your art, even in your life as a human, for your own well-being? How do you position yourself, and what is your goal and aim in this space, knowing that exclusion is what you're living?
Well, in order to kind of like maybe make sense of this, because those who are not inside of the, let's say, the gallery space or that kind of thing, they will find this very bizarre. But it became increasingly obvious that around 10 years ago, like if you were in the form that I am in, which is a straight, heterosexual, middle-aged white man from Finland. Finland breaks the narrative a little bit, but other than that, that is probably the most unpopular form in the arts that you could have. And then on top of that, I'm very interested in world religion and transcendent experiences, and I work with a lot of essentially condensing beauty. Beauty is not something that postmodernists are very fond of, and these new monetization things and Web3 and all whatever, which is another narrative of capitalism that should be thrown out of the world, of course. So I might as well be Satan. Regardless of what I've dedicated about 16 years to women's empowerment. I use a lot of postmodern ideas and it's given a great contribution in order for me to create the way that I do, which started with first film and music. But when I jumped into contemporary art, I started body painting people. And body painting is really the wrong word, because I was trying to capture the spirit of that person and make their archetypes and the grand story of humanity come alive. So begrudgingly, slowly, I came to realize that all of the things and the form of who I am was against the narrative of what was being promoted or what was sort of quote unquote permissible. So even though my values were quite a lot actually aligned with a lot of the postmodern ideas and all this kind of thing, I just found myself excluded, even though I made a lot of projects that kind of were visible and got some critical acclaim and all of this. Strangely, a lot of doors were kept shut. So what that led was a lot of financial strife, physical ill-being, all different kinds of things. The first 10 years of my visual art career were absolutely horrible. And then it's only after the Web3 space came to being and the Bitcoin creative space and then decentralization is that life started making any sense whatsoever. And it's really a miracle, and credit to my wife, now my wife, then fiance, that we managed to stay together, even though we were living in a backyard bike shed in London and trying to make any ends meet. And she was working 2 jobs. So I've paid a price for this all, and I increasingly see that many other people are paying the price. But there's the bigger thing is the whole creative consciousness of the world that we're playing and messing around with, not really, I don't think, fully conscious of all the consequences, and all those consequences we're starting to see in culture altogether, in increasing amounts of mental illness and kind of things that seem to be upside down. And I think the art world plays a part in this. It's not big. We have many things going on in the world, that's for sure, but I don't think this should be belittled in significance if we aren't going to put all of what we can put as humanity into this creative venture.
Yeah, understood. I mean, nevertheless, you mentioned you started with this, I still call it body painting experience and artworks. You try to express what you do express as well with your NFTs, and in that space, in my perception, your main thoughts always reach out beyond just showing something that you can perceive in the moment, but you try to also touch history, touch human being as a philosophical aspect, as an intellectual persona that you create.
I'm trying to find a way on how to answer that. It's a peculiar thing, because I feel like the output of what I've put out there is kind of prime time. And then I found myself battling something that I couldn't really see what it was or why it was, or put a finger on it, why it was going the way that it was. And slowly but surely it comes into full view of what the thing is. And the outsider thing was really never the intent. I always admired these artists who were world class and world changing, and whether it's to do with Steve Jobs to Elon Musk, who are doing some things, or Michelangelo to Da Vinci to what they did, or Dali was really the person who gave me the creative kick to come online when I was a child, and all of a sudden this world existed inside of me that had no words. It was just, he brought to the collective unconscious, he brought it to the surface in such a way. And that was always the kind of level of ambition that I had, is that if I can touch upon that kind of a thing that is bubbling underneath the surface and then bring it to, that's the job of an artist. Yeah. And in the postmodern view, we've come to kind of see that you're, as an artist, you may be allowed to critique society or power, and only from a certain aspect of it, of course, but you're not allowed to deal with these kinds of things that I think were the primary movers of humanity, going from what was expressed in some of these cave paintings or churches, or what divinity or transcendence, or what is the world beneath the surface of the visual sort of material world. And I think the power of ideas is that often, and this maybe plays a little bit to the whole democratization and working class art and all of this kind of thing, is because you need a certain level of sophistication or experiences in order to take seriously what you can't see. And you need a kind of an education in humanities, as well as maybe some magic mushrooms or something, to kind of break through some of those veils.
Yeah.
But once you do, then you realize that you live inside of ideas. And if you don't have respect towards ideas, they will still own you. So that kind of immaterial material, because I know that you as a lawyer, you deal with this kinds of juxtaposition all the time as well. It's what you do as a bread and butter, is how to take the immaterial and material seriously in this kind of way. So both for the artists, this is the thing, but you're not really allowed to kind of grapple with these ideas that we've wrestled with for thousands of years. And for example, right now, I made this thing during the summer that I recalled that I really should have a morning protocol. I should not take my phone as the first thing when I wake up in the morning. I'd rather leave that for a couple of hours and start to read Bhagavad Gita and Friedrich Nietzsche on the other hand. I started with Bhagavad Gita because it's about the ultimate surrender. And then Nietzsche is the sort of this superhuman kind of thing, which are both going in polar opposite directions. And I think if I wrestle with ideas like that, and some of these things that have existed for so long in our tradition, then all of a sudden I'll see what is in front of me in social media and in our contemporary culture. I will see it more clearly. And this is kind of, in a maybe to some counterintuitive way, this has given me the courage to also start speaking about these things very openly, because I've realized that a lot of it is so ridiculous. And we're afraid of not very much, and kind of a lot of the social play that is going on inside of the hierarchies of the art world and those kinds of things, they're really quite illusory. And unless if we embed ourselves into these, realizing that we should take seriously some of the thousands of years of discovery of what we've had as humanity, and then implement that now into something that goes into the metaverse and AI and all the great, amazing things that we're about to have, then we will lose our way. Yeah. But we don't have to. And it's quite simple of how not to.
But I mean, this also offers you so many new possibilities of getting into an interaction with your viewer. I mean, you produce art not for the fact of producing it, maybe as well. It's also something personal. It's a productive session, or a personal way of expressing what you find in yourself. This is me looking at the case or at the client. You perceive a lot, and there's a lot coming up in you that you want to express. We do that with words. You do that with your art. But at the end of the day, through this new technology, let's call it the Web3 space, you have a lot of additional options of getting into an interaction with your viewer. How do you embrace that? Is that an important aspect for you?
Well, I'd like to challenge that a little bit, because if you think about our communication space altogether, the media is legacy media of sorts. Everything from the New York Times to BBC to whatever has a certain point of view. Then you have the tech giants, the Googles and all of those kinds of things, and then institutions like Smithsonian, or you have such a vast landscape. But in actual fact, if you look at it, most of them will be adhering to the postmodern ideas. So the critique of postmodernism is really not a secluded thing only to the art world. It's something that is taken over the Western culture altogether. And if you look at something like the Twitter files of what Taibbi and the likes, what they brought to the surface of what we understand is what's going on in communication altogether, you're not very free to communicate a lot of these ideas if you go off script from postmodernism altogether. So this is what I'm saying, is that yes, you do have the opportunity to bring it about, but also there will be consequences if you're going to say some things that are kind of not in the cultural zeitgeist that is completely supported.
Sorry to interrupt. Where do you personally find a boundary where you're not allowed to express because it's not in the zeitgeist?
Well, I think I've been doing that for 16 years. I mean, there's a lot of museum directors, a lot of gallerists, and especially like all the predominantly female curators who came into the Web3 space. They're very well aware of me, and most of them don't curate me. For example, I had this experience that I was curated for a couple of shows a while ago, and then all the other things that I was kind of expressing were fine. But then after this, in the second show, I kind of wanted to include in this, it was really an abstract piece that was about the cosmos. And it was a reminder that if you get stuck in a thought rut, that you can try to see beyond the human condition and all of a sudden find the freedom from the transcendent, even though and at that time, I saw that there was about 800,000 men who kill themselves a year globally, and it's disproportionately affecting men. And it's something that modern men have been displaced somewhat in their purpose and all these different kinds of things. And I was actively encouraged not to include this part, that it's also encouraging men to not kill themselves. And it was kind of like, don't put that in. And I was like, wait, that's weird. And then I did put it in, because I was like, no, that's not how this works. I'm an artist, and this is something that I want my artwork to be represented, and this is what I want in the text.
Yes.
And ever since then, I was disinvited from being curated by them. So it's a lot of the art world works in such a way that you just weren't selected this time. It's not an active kind of thing. It's more like this behind the scenes power play of who is included and who's not, and who's whatever. And because of the things that I've been expressing, I've had that happen now for 16 years. And this is why I said when we started this conversation that I'm saying all of this begrudgingly, because I wouldn't want to talk about any of this stuff. Politics was the last thing that I wanted to really get involved in any kind of way. And especially now, because it's so super toxic that it's unbelievable. But at the same time, I managed to do quite a lot of innovation and put these thoughts into work such a way that regardless of the support system, general support system of art, not being on my side at all, I managed to do quite a lot. And some of the people who supported me, through them, I managed to sustain myself as a free-thinking artist. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. I managed to do all the things that I've done, regardless of the art world. And if it was up to them, I would have never been an artist.
That's such a shocking example. Sorry to tell you that. Really, this I could not have imagined this being an example. I would have thought something that you cannot say in public. There are some things that really nowadays are impossible, like shaming people for certain criteria. This is something that we have grown into, whether good or not. And the other aspect is, you were saying you're not a political person. I would say you definitely are. And every human being who uses his brain is a political person, because you take part of the world you're in and you take a position. So I know what you mean by saying politics are weird these days and rotten and over the edge. But at the end of the day, you express your opinion. You're part. You are an active part in the society and the time you're living in, and that already is what you should express with your art. And you explained, okay, there are boundaries, and you do not get curated. But at the end of the day, is your artistic freedom, your freedom of speech, really rejected or cut down, or is it something an artist needs to go through to really touch his the people he's living with, his society?
Well, I think a lot of people are finding themselves in this kind of a position now that if they want to hold on to their integrity, they have to sort of drop out or somehow find another way from, let's call it the system altogether. They have to find alternative ways to do it, because it's quite impossible to do so without it. And there's some strange things. And for example, like this might give a little bit of a perspective to this. I used this as an example on one of my tweets a while ago that, for example, the most male-dominated industry in the world is plumbers. And according to different statistics, according to different societies across the world, about 97 to 99% are usually male, but some percentages are female. And midwives are something similar, like 97 to 99% female, and a couple of percent maybe male. Then if you look at the big picture of the world, or countries, usually about half and half are born with a liberal and conservative tendencies. It's maybe the cosmic joke that we have to get along, the yin and the yang, and those kinds of things. And then, but I don't know a single conservative, and I'm not a conservative, but I've grappled with the ideas and come to respect them and integrated a lot of them. But and you always have to give this kind of a caveat in this kind of an environment where we are. But I don't know a single openly conservative visual artist anywhere.
Yeah.
So is that by design, and how is it upkept? So I kind of, because there's this demonization going on in the that I kind of perceive to be illiberals rather than liberals, because I suppose the modern term is classic liberal that I have, even though spiritual and religious tendencies as I do. But I'm more of a let live kind of a person, that it's up to you how you want to do things. But I don't find that the current liberal space is very liberal. And it's demonizing the conservatives, and of course it's going the other way around as well. And I'm just watching a prelude to war altogether. But because of this philosophy tendency in the gallery world, I think one of the most heretical ideas that I've proposed in a tweet was that I think because it's so cheap now to start an online gallery, I think the classic liberals, the centrists, the conservatives, the religious, the male perspective, I think they all should start their own galleries. Because they can now, and or libertarians or the Bitcoin space has already done that, and I think they were groundbreaking in that kind of a way, that the first decentralized art and Bitcoin art that started coming about during the time of when I joined it, and already earlier than I was. I think that's the really first avant-garde art that we've had since the takeover of postmodernists in the 80s. I think we had about 4 decades of people pretending like they were doing something avant-garde. It's like we're stuck in an 80s fashion world with the perspective in the art space. And all I'm saying is that, hey, let's move on. Like, there's so much to explore. Metamodernism came already like in the 90s. I was very inspired by Ken Wilber, the father of integral theory, when I was first, like, my philosophy ideas started forming in my early 20s. So metamodernism already started, and integral art came from that already. So and I've already moved on from that ages ago, but that would be a good start, that the art world would start to feel free to express that side of sincerity and exploration again. And to me now, most of the time, I kind of eye roll when I see the postmodern ideas again being avalanched through the gallery system, because it feels like someone's just still cramming 80s fashion down my throat like it's a new thing.
Yeah, but we're still circling around being against and not including. And being against, whether it's from a liberal or a conservative side, is always excluding. And what you're going through, or what you're heading for, is more a sort of an inclusion, a worldwide one. And I mean, again, let's get back to that Web3 space. Our initial thoughts and ideas were there. What do you wish for the future for the art world in that space to happen, to get a step further, to get rid of the 80s costumes?
I think actually just do what you say that you already are doing, which is inclusion. Include people with different ideas, with different worldviews. I think this really comes down to power. It comes down to privilege. It comes down to status, and the social games that we really kind of have been playing for quite some time at the expense of what the whole art world is meant to be about. So, and it's very uncomfortable. It's for example, but from the other side of things, it's like I know some hippies, lovable people, and I've hung out with them and whatever. And there was this one lady that I saw just a while ago, and she was all about balance and things. And she was going on another retreat where she's going to be screaming into the void to kind of find this and that and whatever. And I was like, you don't actually need to go to another retreat in Bali. What you need to do is go on a course to learn about structure, to learn how to, quote unquote, have some conservative ideas that will actually balance you. Because I think altogether, this is what happens in many ways to humanity altogether, and totalitarian systems. And like if it's a conservative thing and you've gone this way for super long, and then you just think, oh, maybe more conservatism is the answer to the thing that has gotten too conservative. And it's the same with the liberal space. And this is what's going on in the art world, that we've gone so liberal that we've gone full circle, and now just completely land of confusion. But the identity is that if you were to admit to yourself that you would be inspired by an idea that is not quote unquote liberal, then all of a sudden your identity shifts and you would be a conservative. And of course, because they're demons, that's not what you can be. Therefore, it's better to be completely off balance and searching in the void of a thing that you will never find.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. These were so interesting insights. And we did not really talk about art in itself. We had very many philosophical ideas, but I mean, what you express in your art is based in these thoughts, and knowing that about you and hearing your vision will make us understand your art properly, or better, even better, I believe. I will look at it in a different way, nevertheless. And I'm very excited to see what is upcoming. Maybe just give us short insight. What is happening this autumn on your side?
This is a very, very precious moment, I suppose, in my life, because my baby boy, Yalo, is about to be born. Something that is the primary focus now with everything. And I'm building my own company. I'm working with Brittany Kaiser, the famous Cambridge Analytica whistleblower. We're finally going into post-production. The post-production has now started in Cairo through Mercatura Forum and the support of Karim and Dina, which is fantastic. And there's quite a lot of different things that I've learned not to talk about before I actually do them. So I'll keep you posted on some of these things that are very inspiring. But I'll keep on trucking towards the vision, which is ultimately the tech space and our consciousness space. Is oil paintings will always have a very special place in my heart, and of course with most of humanity. But an oil painting doesn't scale to what is required of art and creativity from us very soon. And if you look at where AI is now already and what it's about to do, you really have to move with it to remain relevant to all of this stuff. And I suppose because I had digital originals already 16 years ago, I had a lot of time and needed to have a lot of time to contemplate of how to bring that to the physical world, because otherwise I wouldn't have made any money whatsoever during the time of when there was no Web3 space. But also how the augmented reality space and then the virtual reality space, how they all have their own lanes and they can collapse into my company, which is Vesa Digital, and all the different people that I collaborate with. But it's increasingly going towards that kind of a thing where the art that you will experience will be something of a crossover between a narrated movie that lives with you and virtual reality, and kind of a soul exploration to the point of like maybe what you would otherwise only experience in a setting like an ayahuasca retreat in Peru. And I think this is something that is very necessary, and that's the direction of where we're headed. And again, very important why we should widen the philosophy perspective of what is allowed and supported inside of art, and what we can now sort of bring to the surface of us. And this is in line with the Dali quote that I was saying, to bring it to the surface so we can actually deal with it and then move on.
When you talked to us about the vision of inclusion, the word that came into my mind first was love. And what you're having ahead of you is a pure produce of love, and the best thing that you can have in your life, speaking from my own experience. So I'm wishing you the very best for this, for your personal life, for what is ahead of you, which is the only true miracle we can live. And I'm sending you my very best wishes. God bless. And I'll be very excited to see what this impact will bring for your art and creativity as well. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you so much, Anna. This was brilliant. Really a highlight.